My name is Matthew O'Toole, and I will be presenting Chapter 37, which is Philosophical Problems for Environmentalism. Just a little background on the author here who wrote the chapter. His name is Elliot Sober, as pictured here, and he's a Harvard graduate who is known for philosophy of biology and science, and he has authored and co-authored 13 books. The following slides will explain some of the criticisms that he has, and I will also summarize my own thoughts on the particular arguments that he makes. The ignorance argument. Environmentalists argue that we should preserve everything because we do not know the value it provides yet. Stadler argues that not knowing the value does not provide rationale for humans to preserve it. Must we preserve everything in case there is some alternative function that we discover down the road? Building on that, this small benefit that may eventually come does not outweigh immediate ones that we could receive. For example, if we needed those flowers on the left as a food source, should we forego them in case sometime down the road they're actually a source of medicine? Slippery slope. Stadler mentions that environmentalists always seem to be described it as a natural environment and big picture. That's if true. How can removing a single organism matter when each one contributes so little to the big picture of the environment? He argues that you can still have concern for the environment, but every small disturbance isn't the end of the world. Sometimes the economic benefit may outweigh the minute change within nature. Another concern is related to how environmentalists always seem to state that we are on the precipice of disaster. How are we to determine which stage of the slippery slope we're on? You always seem to see on TV and things like that global warming is going to be the end of the world, and it's always hard to know what stage you're at and how much it's actually being sensationalized and the truth. Nature versus natural. Environmentalists focus on the significant difference between domesticated and non-domesticated animals, with extra emphasis being placed on the preservation of wild ones in their natural habitat. This emphasis on wild being prioritized makes no sense considering that if we are part of nature, everything that is done is part of the natural world, according to Stadler. This also applies to the modification of habitats. Even if we come in to build shelters for animals, we are apparently disturbing the natural balance. Environmentalists are saying that natural means essentially before humans. Determining the wants of nature. Stadler states that the needs of nature are clear. Obviously, the mountain ranges need not to be destroyed entirely to remain in existence. However, how are we to determine that an inanimate object does not want to be modified in any such way? Perhaps these modifications are desirable. Also elaborating on this is that human beings may be interfering with the natural cycle of life. Species go extinct and new ones replace them, and if we keep interjecting to prevent this, then the natural cycle could be disturbed. The demarcation problem. The larger issue, according to Stadler, is the demarcation problem, which is trying to determine what is right between scientific and non-scientific viewpoints. This portion of the argument is the most complex and contains a few different ideas building on this. Environmentalists wish to conclude that the stability of the ecosystem is the only factor to consider. How are we to say that a group of people who are starving should not modify the ecosystem in a way that allows them to survive? What other species in the natural world would do something similar to preserve themselves as a species? Concerns with the preservation of the ecosystem hit the back burner in these instances. An interesting point is made regarding the modification of the environment. Other organisms do not passively exist within the environment and actively modifying and changing it to fit their needs. Why is constructing a highway for humans any different than building an anthill? These actions are both creating artifacts which can be viewed as something that eventually needs to be preserved within the environment, depending on the perspective and when you join the environment. The separation of natural versus nature is once again debated within this section. So here I'm going to sort of set up a chart here that shows the arguments that I agree with and the ones that I object with, and I'm going to go through each one individually and discuss them. So the ignorance argument seems flawed for a few different reasons. The notion that we shouldn't try and preserve all elements of nature to a certain degree because we don't yet know the possible benefit is flawed. Medical advancements and technology are evolving so rapidly, so the depletion or elimination of any resources or species could prove to be very detrimental down the road. I agree with the nature versus natural argument. Placing extra value on wild species takes out consideration for the fact that as humans, we are part of the environment, whether people like this or not. Not everything humans do is damaging to the land, and some consideration that any human intervention with the natural environment isn't inherently negative should get some level of consideration. The slippery slope argument seems poor because it uses the argument that we have a lot, so eliminating some won't cause any big issues in the big picture. Well, this makes sense from sort of a rational perspective. It doesn't take into consideration that there are some species that are crucial to the sustaining of the environment that we live in right now, such as bees or mosquitoes, where the elimination can disrupt the whole ecosystem from top to bottom. Certain species in this system aren't placed at a higher value, and pretending that they're all just part of one large group is a weakness within this argument. The demarcation problem is strong because it allows there to be a debate on how much scientific and non-scientific viewpoints should be weighted. The altruistic idea that we should not meet our basic needs, even if it results in modification of the natural world, is just silly. Once again, coming to the forefront is the idea that as humans, we are separate from the natural world. Although we are having the largest impact of this species, we still deserve the opportunity to have our basic needs met as any other species would attempt to do. The wants of nature argument seems weak to me because it somewhat trivializes the large-scale damage being done to the natural world by humans. By saying the land doesn't have feelings and you don't know what it wants acts as justification for basically any action. There should be some consideration about maintaining some balance and not turning the whole earth into a concrete jungle. As a whole, there's some level of balance to be had between preserving the environment and maintaining the human way of life. The biggest issue comes as the population grows and the consumption levels are maintained, where exactly are all the resources going to come from? And this is just my references page, and thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed and it was informative for you.